Hello, everyone. Welcome to the No Zoo Lines podcast, and welcome to episode 5 with myself, Ari, and Chad. We are rolling along here, and this week's episode is a good one. We are going to be talking about training safely, and it's kind of like the art of coaching as well. Like Chad and I are both coaches and stuff like that, but we really want to focus on training safely and talk about pace and intensity, how to run a safe room and training. And that's what we're going to chat about. We're going to see where it goes. We didn't really plan a lot in this, but I think that Chad and I both have a lot of experience of seeing how things go, how injuries happen, and what happens when a practitioner is injured and they want to quit, or maybe a practitioner's coming in with a whole list of injuries. How do we as coaches deal with them so they don't continue to get injured? And lastly, how do we convince our administrators and departments that jujitsu and training is not the worst thing in the world, because obviously they're very risk adverse when it comes to training. So welcome, Chad. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
All right. Yeah, let's get into it. I think it's such a valuable topic because, Arnie, you guys did a study on why cops don't train some time ago.
Yeah.
It's one of your original pieces. Now, for everyone listening to this, don't forget until November 20th, there's a current study up at invictusleo.com that covers a current study on training and being in law enforcement, that kind of thing. So please go participate. But in a past study, you guys asked why cops don't train. And one of the reasons that I think came up then and comes up routinely is nervous about being injured, afraid of being injured.
Yeah.
And is that injury going to be covered by the department? Am I going to eat that injury? I think the injury thing is just a real question on people's mind. Have you found that to be true as well?
Yeah, that feedback we got that was actually one of the top ones. It wasn't actually cost, it wasn't anything like that. It was actually just fear of being injured and not being able to work. And like you said, having the department paying for that injury and stuff like that. So that's a massive one.
Sure. Now, you've navigated this your whole policing career where you are training. And so you've been training from the moment you came on the department. And how long have you been a police officer?
Going on year 11 now.
Okay. And then how many years did you train prior to becoming a police officer?
20.
20. Yeah. So you're looking at 3 decades of combative work yourself. I would assume injuries are important to you as well.
Yes, they are. I mean, and avoiding them and dealing with them
Yeah.
and learning from my past mistakes. So I think that, not to cut you off, but I think my previous experience dealing with injuries and also seeing my colleagues having injuries, I am now able to navigate things much better. Now, I wish in my youthful exuberance that I was able to listen to the wisdom of people who came before me and said, hey, you really should avoid putting your knee here and twisting and doing this move and stuff. And I'm like, whatever. And I think we all go through that. But I would say my biggest advice for you, if you're a younger officer that's training jujitsu, is please listen to those who came before you, because it's not a joke and it can happen to you. And if you can avoid those pitfalls, you're actually going to last longer on the mat.
Well, kind of thinking of a historical look, a historical lens, because I've been training now since 1998, late 90s, very late 90s, late 98 into 99. So basically all of the 2000s, been training a lot. Well, and 99 a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the issues when jujitsu and mixed martial arts first became a thing in the States and in North America, really, and the United States and in Canada, because there were no predecessors before us, I think that back then we kind of thought you had to train a certain way to gain any competency. And I think I know before I trained jujitsu and mixed martial arts, the only barometer I had on my toughness was traditional sports or some street fights that I'd been in as a youth through high school, right? Once I graduated high school, I've only had to defend myself in a self-defense capacity. It's not law enforcement related 2 times in my life.
Yeah.
Once I graduated high school, I've had 2 occasions where I have had to physically take action because I felt like a threat was going to come after me and I was going to sustain an injury. So I've got this small subset, and all of it's based on aggression. It's based on adrenaline. It's based on all out effort. And when I first started training, I connected those two things and said, well, my training session isn't like my fights, then my training session's not real. And that was my thought when I first started. Did you have a similar experience when you first started? Because some people might be listening to us and go, yeah, but I will be the new guy now. So am I going to go through what Ari and Chad went through as new guys? I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. What are your thoughts?
So I exactly went through the same thing you did. We trained harder, not smarter. And I think the reason that the new guys now are going to have a benefit is because old guys like us are running rooms to tell you there's smarter ways to do it. You just mentioned talking about GSP, and he was talking about how to train and stuff like that. I think that how we take our coaching and how we are coaching now will help future generations. You have to think about when BJJ came into the US, what were they doing down in Brazil? Right? They were having matches, they were beating the shit out of each other. And it was a thing that they incorporated into the United States. But I think now, as it's going on, we're starting to see a shift because where are those guys? Who's retired? Who's broken and can't even continue? Right. So
So
thank
let's
good.
talk.
So I'm
Oh,
just
go
saying,
ahead.
yeah, like thank goodness that you and we've both been injured, but we don't have injuries that have been catastrophic that have put us off. And so I think there's some luck involved in that, but there's also a lot of thinking about it and trying to avoid it.
Sure. Let's talk about that GSP quote for a minute because I just resonated so closely to it. George St. Pierre was on the Joe Rogan show, and they were talking about training it. And GSP said to Joe, he said there are a number of guys, and I don't want to say their name, so he's being professionally polite.
Yeah.
But he said, I have watched guys leave their career in the gym. And then he defined that by saying every practice session with some guys was a fight. They had to win the session. It was full speed. It was like a fight. And he goes, all of those guys shortened their lifespan in the sport. It certainly wasn't they weren't talented or good, but they had a shortened lifespan. Now, George, if people just Google him, still in phenomenal shape at the age he's at, still trains daily,
Yeah.
multiple times a week, still does all the stuff he's done for years back to when he was a world champion, dominant champion in the UFC. And he says the secret is when you're training, a lot of your training, he describes it as play. We're going to describe today throughout this podcast. It's more of a tempo or an intensity thing of the training where I can still learn and grow, but I have to account for the fact that we are doing the reason it's so successful as a self-defense mechanism or as a law enforcement mechanism is, and we had this on another podcast, is the force we're using is dominant and it's scalable. So if I don't scale it when I'm training with my buddies, you and I have rolled multiple times, you've never come close to injuring me.
Mhm.
You've finished me where I submitted and I acknowledged that you could have applied sufficient force to maybe get a break or hurt me, but you've never hurt me. But we're rolling for real. We're really getting into these positions and attempting. And so George spoke about this on the Joe Rogan show and said all of the guys, and that's like the evolution for me of training in North America, at least. The evolution of training is when it first got introduced to us, I don't think any of us really knew how to appropriately train it and appropriately over a long period of time because it was new. And I think that knowledge is the side that can help us introduce this into a law enforcement setting where we control that variable of consistent or expected or significant injury from just regular training.
So why is it then back 20 years ago, would you say that when we were training, it was an ego-filled environment where we thought that training harder was the only way to do it because we had to pressure test ourselves every single time and if we didn't, then we were somehow weak. I don't know. Like I'm just curious. I'm throwing that out there. I don't know, but what do you think?
I think there was some of that. I think we were more concerned. I think there was some of that because number one, like, and so now I'm talking about the early 2000s, right?
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit of an ego thing because we don't have any experience in it. And it's almost like, hey, are you tough enough to do this or not? And Matt Thornton, even way back in the day at Straight Blast Gym, and we were fighting hard, but he made a shirt that said, tough is not how you act or dress, tough is how you train, or something like this.
Mhm.
And there was this idea. Now, Matt's a phenomenal coach. Straight Blast is a great gym.
Yeah.
They certainly have grown. If you went to a Straight Blast class today, and here's the thing, don't confuse growth in the way that we coach and the way that we train with softness or with weakness. That's not it. We're saying we can reach these same goals. And occasionally you do have to have really tough rounds, really hard rounds. But we can talk about that as we go throughout the podcast. And we can prepare for those rounds. But your day-to-day training, especially training done at work. So I'm running an in-service class. I'm running an academy class. I'm running one of these classes. The vast majority of that training should be skill acquisition, and it should be based on growth for the students at wherever they're at. If I have a guy who's already a purple belt and he had three in Vegas, we might get a purple belt who has MMA fights, who comes to our academy. That guy, if I have another guy that's similar to him, those two can go at a pace in the training room that the rest of the training room cannot go at because they're competent. But when I pair that guy with a new recruit, I expect him to go in a playful manner, in a teaching manner. And if I don't, certainly staff should be doing that. So we can talk. You run a gym. You've run a gym forever. You have a training. Today we were texting back and forth about getting online, and you were like, "Hey, I'm finishing up a workout."
Mhm.
You did it today with training partners.
Mhm.
What is something you're doing to account for the fact that what you're doing is dangerous? What is something you are specifically doing as an instructor that reasonably controls the rate of injury and the significance of the injuries occurred by your students?
I think it's two things. I think one, knowing who's on the mat is important. So actually knowing your students that they're not just numbers. So I know how each of my students roll, what their pace is, intensity. That's important. So I can see when it's oil and water on the mat, right? I'm like, oh, that's a dangerous combo. Um, I have no problem as a coach saying, you guys are not rolling together today. It's not happening. Because I know that this person is intensity here, this person is injury prone or whatever. That's just not a good match. I know people who are controlled. So I think matchmaking as a coach is is a safety measure on the mat. I think also you need to rely on the experience of students and you have to give them some. I can't always be there. We're like parents. We can't always be there. So rely on the students who are advanced students to help out, to talk, to understand tempo and things like that. We're going to talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that now because you said a really cool thing before the podcast started. And you said that most injuries happen at speed or fatigue. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's such a great line. And when I see most of the stuff happens, that is exactly it. So,
So I appreciate the attribution. The attribution will go to Brian Hartman, who is a senior instructor at PFC training. Brian is our senior instructor and director over training for our tactical training for PFC training, which is a sister company to C4CPJJ. In fact, it's a parent company would be a better wording. And C4CPJJ is a company underneath that umbrella of PFC training, Paul, Frank, Charlie, Progressive Force Concepts. Now, Brian's our lead instructor, and Brian said that to me once. I've adopted it, but injuries are going to occur at the end of two extremes. And one is, how tired are your students? What have you done to them that's fatigued them? So you have to be watching the room for fatigue. You have to be accounting for that. And then the second thing is speed, meaning going too fast too soon or too fast too consistently. Both of those things will produce injury. Now, you said something that was interesting is get to know the room and then who to match up. Matchups are very important. But sometimes you and I teach in a seminar setting where we don't know the room.
Yep.
And then it becomes vital when it's an unknown room. And you and I have been in rooms with 100 plus where you're giving a segment or I'm giving a segment. I see some very intentional things happen in those settings for us where we've had no significant injury at those large events. We haven't had free-for-alls. We haven't had the class go off the rails. And a couple things happen at these large-scale events that we run through Invictus or through PJJ. And other companies do them as well, but those are the ones you and I do constantly. One is we've got a lead instructor showing a block of instruction, but the other instructors are on the mat. And they might be and they're on the mat as eyes and ears to watch the room. Depending on how large a room you have, you're going to generally put students in a minimum of 2s. If it's a team event, you're going to put them in 3 to 4. I need to have, for every 10 to 12 students, I need to have an instructor because those break down into groups. If I had 10 students, that's 5 groups I'm watching, and that's probably doable, but that's starting to stress me. Once I start getting into 15 students, I need a second guy or gal there. Once we start getting into 20 plus, we're really looking at 3 to 4 instructors, depending on the room and depending on what we're coaching and what we're doing. Are we doing takedowns? Are we doing ground stuff where they're just working to their feet? So some of it depends on what we're training, but we need to have an appropriate instructor to student ratio. That's one thing. And then those other instructors are watching people drill. But here's what we really do at seminars because we don't know the room. And what I see all of us do, we set the pace, we demo, we show them this will be what you're doing with your partner. Your partner will do this and you will do this. And we demo what's going to get done. And we demo the tempo or the intensity or the aggression or fill in the blank. And sometimes we do that progressively, where we'll show a position, a movement, a thing. We'll have them drill it cooperatively. Then we'll say, okay, the person on top, now you're going to give this level of resistance. Once we demo it, we don't say 30%, 40%, 50%. We demo the resistance and the pressure we want the top person to go. And then once we see performance in the room, safe performance, we go, okay, well, now you can resist full speed, but we might even limit it. It's not a free-for-all. You can go full speed, but now you don't suddenly get a bull start stand on your feet and you're just going to fight each other. You're going to go full speed through the things we've already been working on. And once it's achieved, then you just reset. And it's achieved, then you reset. So we control that because many times in law enforcement, you're not going to know all the officers, depending on the size of your agency. In an academy class, your first ET session with an academy class, you're not going to know any of them. They're not on your agency. And so what's going to be vitally important when you first get a group in a law enforcement setting that's in service, squad level training, academy setting, what's vital is setting pace, setting intensity. That's vital. I've got another little acronym that we use, and once again, this comes from PFC, but we've adopted it over to PJJ, and that is mechanics, consistency, and tempo.
MCT.
MCT for those guys who are instructors or gals who are instructors out there. MCT. So what does MCT mean? Mechanics. Mechanics means how do we do what we're doing? Are we doing a certain technique? Are we doing just how to achieve an underhook from somebody who's got side control top? How do we mechanically do whatever it is we want them to do? And we can break that down into small chunks and have them achieve one thing mechanically and go drill it and then come back and add the next thing and then go drill it and come back and add the next thing. Or depending on the room, back to your point. Now it's DTIs in the room and we're doing DTI work. And by DTI, I mean instructor level people. They're familiar with the curriculum. Well, now maybe we say, okay, guys, we're going to work our underhook to our get up from half guard bottom. That might be enough instruction for a DTI room, but then we're going to show the pace at which we're going to contest that. So mechanics is what are we doing? Consistency means I, as a coach, am looking for consistent application, correct application of whatever we mechanically taught them. And then tempo is, I've got to set a tempo to start with, but I'll tell you, there's times I look at the room and I bring them back and I break it down to even a smaller sliver, or I just say, okay, bring it back. Okay, everyone's going too fast. Or I bring back and go, okay, everyone's got that. That first round looked really good. You were mechanically correct on a consistent basis. Now we're going to do this a little more alive. Let me demonstrate what that would look like. And I demonstrate that new tempo. And so as an instructor, if you'll use MCT, so Ari, how do you incorporate that even if you don't call it that? Do you have a version of that you're incorporating as an instructor? And do you add anything? Is there anything in there that you would go, hey, I would add this thing?
I think that's a really good question. So I think I kind of do what you do. We talked about MCT before, and I think I do it. I talk about say I'm demonstrating, and it's like, here, this is the pace I want you to go at. And then I actually break it into segments saying there's some pitfalls here. Do not go fast at this point. See a fully extended arm? If you put your leg over my head very quickly, it's hyperextend. So this is where your intensity and your pace needs to slow down. Please be careful. But leads me to something where I would say most people who are unaware of how jiu-jitsu works will first rely on their athleticism and strength in order to achieve what they're doing. So I have a student of mine, and he's been with me for maybe 8 months. He's a big guy. He's strong. He's fast. And his pace and intensity, I'm always trying to bring him down because he knows nothing else. Eventually, we always see it. If you're in jiu-jitsu long enough, you will start up from here. Then you can maintain this level the entire time and be totally, you don't have to. And then once in a while, you can go up. But he's up here all the time. So I'm trying to always bring him down. So I think tempo and intensity is important, which brings me to a question for you. This particular guy that trains with me, I have another big guy in my gym. And actually, as a matter of fact, they were on the mats today with me. They're both bigger than me. They're both younger than me. They're 6'3", 6'4", over 200 pounds. And I paired them up with one another. And they had some intense rolls. Now, I told them before they started, so I had a group they were together, and then I had two others together. And I said, before you guys start, look down at your partner, look in their eyes, because we started in half guard. And I said, ask them from a scale of 1 to 10, theoretically, what pace you want to go at today. The group to my left goes, I want to go at a 3 and a 4. Then I looked at the two big guys, and I kid you not, one of them goes, I'd like to go at an 11. And then the other guy goes, I want to go at a 12. And I said, okay. So yeah. I said, just be aware you guys have a contract with one another. Don't try to hurt each other. And they did not go to 11 and 12. But they love the competitive. So I let them go for it. Now, I think this is a way to understand because a lot of times you bump and you slap and you go and you don't know what your partner wants to go at. And then you're like, I'm at a 2 in my head and they're going at an 11. That's where an injury can happen. But they had this kind of social contract and they rolled. There was no injury. They were out of breath. It was a good roll. And they actually were able to kind of shut each other down so nothing crazy happened.
How long have those guys been training with you?
One of them's been training for 2 years. He's a blue belt, and the other one is like a mid-level white belt, and he's been about 8 months.
Okay. Well, they both have the hours in to increase their pace.
Mhm.
Like that's fine. And here's an important thing that I just thought of that when I first started jujitsu, they would always say, don't use strength, don't use strength. And it would grate on me a little bit because then we're always like noodles and we're just like letting people move around. I think what they mean is don't use speed. Don't be herky jerky and fast. Don't be at 11 when your partner's at a 4. I
Yeah.
think that's really what they mean because did you ever roll with Keith prior to Keith passing where Keith didn't feel strong?
Like, yeah, he felt like a
He
tank
felt
parking.
strong though.
Yeah,
He's not using is limb breaking intensity.
right.
He's submitting you. How many times Keith tapped you?
Lots.
Okay. But he did it slow and controlled.
Correct.
When he tapped you, was it strong?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see my point? I
Yeah.
think what we have to build into our students is position, pressure, strength is fine. Explosion is not.
You know,
Now, if Keith rolled with, did Keith sometimes roll with smaller females or weaker men or older men?
yep.
Would he adjust even his pressure to his partner
Yes.
commensurate to where they were at?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, I would say, like Cam Cousins is one of our guys. We've talked about Cam before. I don't want Cam Donkey Konging 165-pound dude who's never trained, who comes up to the PPA to our mat room, and Cam just pressures the crap out of him. And the kid never comes back, even if he doesn't hurt him. So there are times we're going to back off on strength. I agree. But I almost think it's like, I actually want to train you to be positionally strong and to be physical, but to be safe while you do it. And as a cop, you have to do that. When you go on a call, you can use a reasonable amount of force. And a reasonable amount of force is that force that was necessary and probably not more. That's what makes force become excessive or inappropriate is you used more force than was reasonable. Well, in jujitsu rules all the time, it's training us. This is why it's important to train this as an agency. It trains me to use a reasonable amount of force in practice and not more. And so that is built in, and that makes us safer on calls. How do you control pace? What analogy or mechanism do you use as a coach? What analogy do you use as a coach to control speed? Since speed is one of the factors we're going to see injury.
So I constantly am saying this. It's been coming up a lot recently. I believe that speed and smoothness are not the same. So people will increase their speed and think that they're being more smooth. And I say, no, actually decrease your speed, get to your smoothness. Once you get there, then your speed actually can increase. I think that things that are smooth look faster. Things that are faster don't look smooth and aren't actually better. So I'm constantly yelling in the room if I'm coaching or whatever. I'm like, I'd rather see you smooth and slow down than go fast. I think speed is a factor of smoothness. Uh, Effective speed is a factor of smoothness. Let me say it that way. So,
Yeah, I think so. There's a crawl, walk, run analogies that guys will use as well.
yeah.
That can be hard for people to conceptualize, but you could demo that. I'm also a fan of teaching someone how to drive a car. Where do we initially take them? We take them to an empty parking lot. Why? It controls distractions or other things that might pop out, and you have to go slow. You're in a parking lot. And we can control speed. We can control other variables.
Mm.
Okay, once our kid starts learning how to drive in the parking lot, we go on surrounding neighborhood streets where speeds are typically lower. Um, other things that get in the way will be lower. Once the kid can drive in the neighborhood consistently over time, we get out on the thoroughfares, the more wide open streets that might have 2 to 3 lanes that are just connecting streets within the city. If the kid drives while there, we let them take the car out onto the freeway and they can drive at freeway speeds. But you shouldn't be driving at freeway speeds in a parking lot. Almost all learning in combatives happens in parking lots. When you show me a new way to finish a heel hook or a new way to put my hands or a new way to hit a sweep, you call it the Valhalla escape from Mount, where you eventually put the leg over the top and pull them back and sweep them.
Yep.
That escape, when you first showed me, you hip out, you widen out the one leg, you make it light, you cross it over, you sweep them. When you first showed me that sweep, you slowed it down. Now I'm a very competent user, but you demonstrated it at fight speed, for lack of a better word, just a normal speed. But when you taught me the mechanics of it, you taught me the mechanics at a tempo that was a learning tempo. And even as an experienced practitioner, that learning tempo was driving a car in a parking lot, very, very low speeds, very little distractions. We're focused on this. Once I got it and I demoed it and I played it back for you a couple times, you were like, oh, okay, well, now you could add this. And hey, if they do this, you could even add this. And we're still in the parking lot playing around. Then we started drilling it at just normal speeds. And then we started pressure testing a little bit and really having a few goes where you're mounted and I have to try to work towards this solution. So I often will use that too. However, I don't care what for instructors who are listening to us or coaches, you can have your own verbiage for how you control pace, but you've got to be controlling pace and it has to be intentional. And controlling pace means demonstrating the pace to your students and coming up with this is a general pace for the room. And I do like, and I believe it is okay for the more experienced practitioners to have a contract to go at a different pace. There are times, we have a guy right now trying to get ready for a significant grappling event at Extreme Couture. He's a professional grappler. We had regular class the other night. We had Justin Glasgow, who's a black belt out of Toronto, who's a police officer, was at class that night. Justin Henry Akins came as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we taught no-gi segment at Extreme Couture. Once class ended, our competitor, who just participated in the normal class and normal pace, said, guys, I'm getting ready for this event. I'll be next door. If guys can stay and give me, hard conditioning fight rounds. So everyone knows what that is. And we're going to go at him and we're going to send bodies at him because he's getting ready for this very specific competition. Now, if a 2-day white belt said, hey, I'm going to stay and help you get ready, he would say, hey, I appreciate how, but no thanks. This is an invitation for people who can drive to go on the freeway and get in a race with him. And he put that in a setting outside of class, which was appropriate. Inside of class, he didn't do his fight prep because it's an inappropriate time for the tempo and the pressure and the aggression that he needs. And so he's setting it up. So the way we train, what we're training for can vary. My training as a SWAT team and everyone on the team keeps up? And are we doing room clearing at that pace? Or are we doing patrol, introductory, how to clear a building with 2 or 3 guys? Those are 2 different ways to go through the house. And DTs is no different. And I believe one of the problems in law enforcement is traditional DTs, you have coaches who don't understand, they've never learned how to control the room. And so then they're showing a move and then they're just saying, okay, go ahead and try it.
Yeah.
And then guys are sustaining injury.
So how do you, this is going to be a tough question, but say we have some white belts that are listening to this, new cops, or not even new cops, new to jujitsu, and they go, how do I control pace like myself? Like I don't know any different. I've been in for 4 months. I still going really hard. I know I'm going hard, but it's all I know. And I realize that over the next few years, my pace will probably adjust better. Um, it's a kind of a joke. It's like, what gears do white belts have? They usually have a first gear and a fifth gear.
I see this often when I'm leading a class, and
Yeah.
I'll demo it at a pace and I'll look around. It's not that pace. And so I'll begin to yell out, hey, if you think you're going slow, go slower. You slow down right now. And I'm talking to everybody in the room, and I'll see the room start to lessen their intensity and slow down. And I'll just say, or I'll say it to a specific group, hey, you two, slow down. And I'll say, you need to go slower. Well, coach, I don't think I can win if I go slower. Okay, you're not going to win today. You're going to experience, I want you to slow down. And I understand what I'm doing because there's two reasons for that. Number one is, so define winning in the training room. That's one of the misconceptions for the person who doesn't train. They
Don't
think
win
winning
practice.
means,
Don't win practice, right?
they think winning means that they're successfully getting on top, they're successfully submitting their opponent. They don't see winning as understanding why in a controlled manner they can't come to top, or how the other guy's countering that or gal, and how are they getting submitted. And so I try to flip what winning means in training versus what winning means on a call for service. That's number one. And then number two is, even if you successfully went, let's say you and I are in a class, we're relatively new, they show us something, and then you and I pair off, and when it comes time to pressure test, we go crazy. We go as fast as we can go, and we stumble our way through the workout, but we don't sustain any injury. Sometimes this will also happen with wrestlers who were teaching them jujitsu, and then once we go, they just wrestle, and they wrestle full speed. And they wrestle very successfully for a winning and losing idea. But I tell my wrestlers in that case, I go, when I see you go at the speed you're going, you are doing things you already know or things that are intuitive to you. You are not learning. You are not showing me growth. You're not doing the new thing. And I'm watching you. And you try what we worked on today for about 0.6 seconds till you feel like it's not going to work, and you're abandoning it and going right back to the same thing I see you do every day at practice. And by the way, that's awesome as long as it works, till it doesn't work. And why did you come to the first part of practice if you're not going to try to acquire that? So we have to redefine for them also as an instructor. It's okay if it fails. It's okay if you try this. If you legitimately try this in a controlled fashion 30 times today and miss, and you've never tried it before, guess what? You're going to have to try it about 100 more times and miss before you start to get it successfully. So you've got to have it in you to say it's not about actually getting the sweep. It's about trying to get the sweep set up, trying to mechanically get there, and trying to do it. If you can't do it controlled, if you can only do whatever you're doing based on physical attributes, I was faster than Ari today, I was stronger than Ari. Therefore, I won. There's no growth there. You just happen to be stronger than Ari or Chad, whoever the inverse is. If you and I are going and I'm trying to acquire a new thing to do to you, and it fails and it fails and it fails, but next week I go back to it, next week, and in a month and a half, I hit it on you, I have grown and added to my game. So I always tell my athletes, even if you're not getting hurt, you say, Chad, I can go fast, not get hurt. And my partners aren't getting hurt. So now what? I'll go, yeah, you're doing the same thing you've been doing from the time I've known you. you've not learned anything. You're just doing the same thing. And so congratulations. You are staying fit. That's good. You are keeping timing. That's good, but you're not growing. Control. But once again, I mean, you're two big guys. You know they can go at a pace that's different than a 58-year-old dude who's newer to jiu-jitsu.
Mhm.
Those two big kids can go at a different pace, and so you can let them.
Yep.
You know,
And I think as a coach, you need to be able to adjust to your student base, because if you are constantly slowing them down, you are actually doing a disservice to them. They have something that others don't, or, like I used to love going at a super high pace, but I'm older, so things change. But I have to let them indulge themselves a little bit as long as it's in a controlled manner. That's a real thing. And I find I'm guilty of it too. I have my toolbox and I see wrist locks everywhere. And I'm like, I could finish him here with a wrist lock, but I will avoid that so I can work on something that I'm, at a blue belt level out. And I really want to get to that purple belt level at my certain move. And I truly believe that's kind of how black belts are. We have different levels of moves. Like I have some black belt level stuff, and then my white belt level moves because I haven't practiced them enough. So I'll talk about that. So if you're doing police jiu-jitsu and you have a room full of people with their gis on and they have their belts on, but there's no belt, no duty belts or anything like that. So today, when we were rolling, I have a drill that we do, and it's called untie the belt. And so what you do is first we started standing, and I said, here's what you're going to do. You're each going to see if you can untie the other person's belt. The job of the person who's defending is you're not allowed to hold onto your belt and just keep the knot tied. Your job is to work those hands. So it's really a hand fight drill, and it simulates them grabbing onto any of your weapon systems. And so we started doing that. And then the next thing we moved to, it's like, okay, now you're going to have the bad guy grab you from behind and holding on. Now they're reaching for your tool belt from behind. So you're at a coffee shop, guy grabs onto your gun, and then you start defending. And it literally, like within 5 seconds, you should be able to peel away, step away, and face your opponent. And it worked really well. Then we moved down to the ground position, and same thing. And so I guess the reason I'm saying this is you can adjust your police jiu-jitsu, your combative training. You can still be wearing the gi. A lot of people are just like, no, it's not practical. It doesn't make any sense. It totally works. So just the fact of you trying to untie the belt works all of this hand stuff. And it worked really well today. So it was fun.
that's pretty cool, and it's cool to find fun ways to train that are still safe. I mean, you could run that drill 10,000 times, and you're not going to get the crushed fingers. You're not going to get the bruising,
Mhm.
the gun belt. You're not going to get a hand stuck under the gun belt. The gun belt's unforgiving.
Yeah.
Um, you don't have to be switching belts back and forth, which takes time away from training.
Yeah.
Drills like this that build skill sets that you can also scale that one and go uber fast as they get proficient. You can really, especially on the ground. We're both on the ground now. Okay, you're full on trying to untie each other's belt.
Yeah.
There's that is a safe way to have them train, be physical, feel pressure, exert pressure, and not sustain damage. I think it's vital. Every drill, that's the other problem with law enforcement training, is they're like, well, this isn't realistic. This is realistic. Well, crap, if we had a realistic fight in training, injuries would go through the roof.
Yeah.
Our MMA practices for our athletes who fight in the UFC don't don't look like they're not at the same intensity pace as a real fight. No one would ever fight. Everyone would be broken. Going back to what George said, like no one's getting out of the training room, and George requires things being playful. I think that's an interesting, fun way for you to adjust training to your students and allow them to physically get after each other and mitigate damage. And so everything we do to mitigate damage is good.
So part of our training safely is finding ways to do it obviously to continue doing it. And so, like you said, like the gun belt, super unforgiving. That holster, we've all got damage from it. So it can be done in an atmosphere of without having your weapon systems on the mat or anything like that. So yes. So I think as part of a coach, you need to start searching out those ideas that are going to keep people safe. So proper gear, that's an important thing. So we're talking about, do you even have gear on the mat to
So yes, if you're going to strike each other, I believe you can either have, um, you have to really, you can have open palm touching, but you've
Mhm.
got to demo that and say, this is a pace. It goes back to pace. If we're going to hit each other, minimum is MMA gloves, not bag gloves. And guys confuse those.
Yeah.
MMA gloves have some padding. You've got to have anything from 2 to 6 ounce, maybe even 8 ounce for your MMA gloves. I find that anywhere from 4 to 6 is generally a sweet spot because I can grapple with those as well.
Mhm.
And that's effective. Um, Big gloves for boxing should be 12 ounces, maybe 16. I don't like the 20 or 18 ounce gloves. Those are like clown gloves, but 12 or 16. And then headgear, boxing headgear can be good for striking. You can also get full face headgear. And Redbeard Combatives, he doesn't pay me. I don't belong to his company. Redbeard Combatives has a great product as well.
Mhm.
A great helmet, a great line of helmets that you can train and include simunitions and weapon systems with Redbeard Combatives helmets.
So having those proper gear obviously important. So let me recap on kind of some of the things that we've talked about and that you've said. So how do you run a room which is safe? How do you prevent officers from getting injured? So Chad today talked about speed. He talked about how fatigue can cause injury. We talked about pace. Pace was a big one. I think if I was going to pull something from this episode so far, it would be pace. Understanding the room, super important. And I think that maybe having a discussion with administration and stuff, because they just think we're doing something down in the mat room and they don't even actually really know what we do sometimes. And these are some of the concepts that you just have to kind of present to them. So that intensity, that pace, and those safety measures. Do you have any other things that come to mind when you're talking about running a safe room or anything like that, Chad?
Um, I think the only other thing would be stick to the script. If you show something, the students should stick to what you're showing.
Mhm.
Don't go off script, don't do their own thing, and stick to what we're training that day. And I think that'd be about it.
Okay. So the lion's share, to quote, I'm a 58-year-old blue belt who's retired from policing for over 30 years. I love training. I love doing what I do. I love my group. I love learning. However, every morning I'm waking up injured, sore, and I don't know how much longer my body's going to hold up. So I feel that I might be on the cusp of quitting as a blue belt, even though I really love doing what I do. Do you have any advice on how a 58-year-old, 30-year member retired blue belt can continue training at his school?
Yeah, I think number one is we're dying on our couch or we're dying on the gym. I know there's some fear of having pain issues. Pain issues are a part of growing old. You're going to be in pain. You do have to adjust your intensity and your pace, but you can adjust that even if someone's going fast. I had a guy once that was a leg locker, and in my opinion, a bit dangerous. And anytime he grabbed my feet, I just tapped out.
Hmm.
I wouldn't let him work. So uh, I would just tap. Okay, good for you. You caught my foot. You caught my foot. And so you have to set your ego aside and you have to say, training is good for me, but I have to control pace and I'm
Mhm.
responsible for doing that. And I can control my pace at all times. And when I get in bad spots in a training environment, we're talking about training,
Yes.
then you can tap at any point you want to tap. And so I would encourage him to keep going. I would encourage him to study very fundamental based people as because there's different styles of jujitsu. John Danaher has a very fundamental jujitsu that he teaches and that he practices. You are fundamentally based. I am fundamentally based. He could follow guys that have a very fundamentally based systemology. If he equates, I'm getting to me, the only reason that I get drug into fights at paces that are unsafe for me at my age is because I want to win. Like the competitive part of me takes over, and I start saying, "Oh, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to get this guy."
Yeah.
But I go with some extremely tough dudes, and I'm okay. Okay is a relative term. I want to win all the time, but I just know I'm gonna get beat by this guy, whoever it is, and I'm gonna fight as valiantly as I can. So the first part of that is control pace for you and for your age. You won't become healthier by not working out. Like we now have data, we now have studies that have been done, study after study after study, that says that working out is good for you. Do I have to scale the weights I lift in the weight room? This would be the same as me saying, I can't bench 325 pounds like I could when I was young, so I'm not going to bench press anymore. To me, it's the same thing. I can't run. I've got bad knees. I've got a torn ACL on one of my knees right now. On the treadmill, I'll put it at an incline, but I will walk and I will set the pace at a pace I can go for 45 minutes. I can no longer run at 56 with my body. I have a hard time running for 40 minutes. I don't have a hard time walking briskly for 40 minutes. So guess what I do for 40 minutes? I walk briskly. So to me, it's the same thing as jujitsu. Now, to accomplish his goal as an older athlete, he may have to be selective in who he trains with. And he might have to say, I can no longer train with da. And it might be based on him. I can't handle that Johnny beats me. Then stop training with Johnny. Then start training with somebody else. And at his age, I would be careful of training with new, young, athletic dudes. I'd be very careful of that because they just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So I've got to become smarter as I train and I get older. Last thing is, I go to the gym tomorrow and we start doing, I'll go to 10th Planet Vegas, which I have friends there. Casey Halstead is a very fundamentally fight functional jiu-jitsu guy, not the 10th Planet system, but he has coaches that are going to teach lazy claw to bomb killer to weed soaker leg position. Okay, they literally will show that. I'll literally sit out. I'm not doing that. Now they go back to digging an underhook and getting half guard and getting a butterfly hook. I'm back on the mat.
Yep.
So I will also sit out as an older athlete when it's unsafe for me, but I don't stop training. Don't stop.
Love it. Don't stop. Yep.
Yeah.
You die on the couch.
I've had my doctors tell me, you will decline rapidly if you stop training. We want you to train.
Yeah.
It is safe for you and you're training smart.
Yeah.
If as an older athlete, you can't handle, you have to win every second of every round, you're the problem. Jiu-jitsu is not the problem.
Love it.
Not that he's a problem. I like the guy. I don't even know him. You like him. I like him.
Yeah.
But if the mindset is he can't train, he's not winning enough. Even if he's getting injured because he's still attempting to win, knock it off. You're 58 years old.
Yeah.
Be happy with sweating and getting beat by dudes half your age.
Yeah.
And get on that. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm gonna call him out because I wasn't gonna use his name, but this is a message for you, Ralph. So remember, don't
Ralph,
quit.
I love you. I'm 56, brother. Come on.
There you go. You know what, Chad? I'm gonna bring you up. You're gonna come into our home gym. It's gonna be you, me, and Ralph, and he's gonna love it.
That's it. That's it.
Amazing. Well, we appreciate everyone tuning into the No Zoo Lions podcast. Yet another episode with my great friend Chad. Remember, follow us on Instagram, which is No Zoo Lions, and also our website, which is nozoolions.com. Follow Chad or myself on social media. And if you have any questions, just DM us. We're always around. And remember, we have patches and we have some stickers on our website. Lucky's got one of the patches, the subdued patches. I love it. We'll eventually get some more t-shirts. We only had a limited run, and
Oh, you sold out already.
yeah, I didn't get very many, and I told people, but they went, and then so it's the new year. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's awesome. We love it. So remember, don't follow us, lead with us. Check out the No Zoo Lines podcast.